Welcome back to the Crypto World channel, everyone. My name is Josh, and get prepared for a massive move just about to happen in the Bitcoin price. Because right now, Bitcoin is perfectly repeating previous price action, which can tell us exactly what we can expect moving forward. And on top of that, we've got tens of millions of dollars worth of long positions closing. This is providing a selling pressure on the Bitcoin price in the short term, so make sure you stay tuned for that. And on top of that, I'll be going over other Bitcoin patterns right now that we need to be paying attention to here in the short term. So definitely make sure you're watching this video all the way to the end so that you're not missing out on any of this important information. And just before we jump into it, make sure to drop a like on the video down below. And if you're new to the channel, you might as well subscribe with notifications turned on so that you're not missing out on any of these future updates that I post every single day here on the channel. But anyway, with all of that out of the way, let's get straight into what this video is about. So right here on the Bitcoin US dollar chart on the daily time frame. And as you can see here, the Bollinger Bands indicator, this indicator right here is having a huge squeeze right now. And historically speaking, that means a massive move is coming soon. Because taking a look at some other examples, as you can see, the last time we saw a pretty decent squeeze on the daily time frame in the Bollinger Bands was right back here at the beginning of September, just before we had a major move to the downside. And then the time before that was back towards the end of July. We had a huge squeeze in the Bollinger Bands just before we saw a very volatile move to the upside. The time before that, we had a major squeeze in the Bollinger Bands during April this year, which sent the Bitcoin price into a very volatile move to the downside. And the time before that one was back here at the end of 2020 when we saw a major breakout to the upside, an extremely volatile move to the upside. So the Bollinger Bands by themselves do not tell us the direction of that volatile move, whether it's going to be to the upside or to the downside. They just prepare us for a volatile move coming soon. And that's where we need to be paying attention to some other patterns, which I will get into in just a moment. But before getting into that, I want to talk about how Bitcoin is consolidating below the previous all-time high level, which is actually something that we've seen in the last 3 times that Bitcoin has seen a huge break into a new all-time high. The last 3 times, we actually had a small break above the all-time high and then a rejection before we later broke above the all-time high. And you'll see exactly what I mean in just a moment when I show you some examples. But for now, just taking a quick look at the current price action, as you can see, the Bitcoin price briefly broke above the previous all-time high, which by the way, the previous all-time high we set back during the middle of April, and that was at just below 65,000 US dollars. And as you can see here, a couple weeks ago, we briefly broke above the all-time high, putting in a new all-time high at around 67,000 before seeing a rejection to the downside. Because obviously the Bitcoin price had no follow through here, we didn't really see any major spike in volume, and also leading up to that breakout into the new all-time high, we didn't really see any major correction along the way. So that meant that a lot of other indicators like the price oscillators, for example, looking in the RSI and the MACD, we were looking overbought. They were getting overheated on this initial push into the new all-time high. So the Bitcoin price was due for a bit of a cool off here according to the price oscillators. And so keep all of this in mind when we're taking a look at the next 2 examples. Once again, the price pushed slightly above the all-time high. We saw a rejection for some time. And during that time, the RSI, after reaching overbought territories, had a bit of a cool off. And we saw a bearish cross in the daily MACD with a bit of a cool off to the downside. Now zooming out further and going back to the previous all-time high breakout, which was at the end of 2020. And as you can see, that was the previous all-time high that we set back in 2017, that bull market top, which was at roughly around 20,000 US dollars, but more specifically around 19.8K. But just zooming into the end of 2020, which was the point that we finally broke into the new all-time high, what we can see here is the fact that the Bitcoin price had a major run up to the upside, which meant that the price oscillators, for example, the RSI, was looking very overheated. We were staying in overbought territories for quite some time here. So when the Bitcoin price finally came up to the point where we were getting ready for the break into a new all-time high, there simply wasn't enough room left to the upside for us to push above the all-time high, because at that stage we were already overbought and we weren't really seeing too much volume coming in here. In fact, the biggest spike of volume initially was on a red daily candle, showing that the selling pressure was a little bit stronger at that stage than the buying pressure, which led the Bitcoin price into a bit of a cool off here, which sent the price oscillators into a cool off. As you can see, we went from overbought areas in the daily RSI down towards the middle of the RSI band, and looking in the daily MACD, we actually saw a bearish cross right there on that first major rejection, and the daily MACD was trending to the downside while we were in this short-term cool-off. And during that time, we were not seeing a lot of volume, but we were seeing a major squeeze in the Bollinger Bands on the daily time frame. And just taking away the indicators, what's very interesting if we're zooming in even further, what we can see here is the fact that the Bitcoin price did indeed put in a new all-time high. We briefly broke into a new all-time high with these small candle wicks to the upside, which mind you, they were less than 1% away from the all-time high. So it was not the breakout that we were looking for, but we did put in a new all-time high before we had a bit more of a a short-term cool-off, and then it was the moment that we finally saw a major spike and surge in the volume, and these huge daily candle closes closing well above the previous all-time high. That was when we finally confirmed the major breakout to the upside, and you can clearly see what happened next to the Bitcoin price. Now zooming all the way out and going back to the previous time where we saw a major breakout into a new all-time high, that was right here. And first of all, the all-time high level that we were breaking above was the all-time high that we set back at the end of 2013 at around 1200 US dollars. And this all-time high breakout attempt right here was during the 2017 bull market. And just zooming in a little bit further, what we can see is obviously Bitcoin broke slightly above the all-time high. We did indeed put in a new all-time high, but we didn't see a major follow through. And in fact, the volume on that initial break just there was staying pretty flat. We didn't really see any major spike in volume. And when we did, it was on a red daily candle, showing that the selling pressure at that stage was stronger than the buying pressure. And so that led the Bitcoin price into a correction. And interestingly enough, bringing out the price oscillators, as you can see here, on this initial push to the upside where we slightly broke into a new all-time high, we were already in overbought areas on the daily RSI, showing that we were overheated and we were due for a bit of a pullback. And at that stage, we also saw a bearish cross in the daily MACD. So in the RSI and the MACD, they were trending to the downside as the price was getting a rejection from the all-time high level, even though we did actually break slightly above the all-time high for a brief amount of time. But in hindsight, that was not really the breakout at all, because we had that correction which lasted a couple weeks, and then we had a recovery which lasted for another 2 weeks approximately. And at that stage, when we came up to the all-time high, we continued to find resistance along the all-time high initially, but when we finally started to break above it, the RSI and the MACD at that stage were nowhere near as overbought and overheated as where we were at this initial time when we had the first attempt of the breakout. So the second time around, we actually had the strength to finally push above the all-time high, and the moment we got a proper confirmed breakout with this surge in volume that came next, you can see exactly what happens next in the Bitcoin price, and that was a major move to the upside. And also what's very interesting is looking in the daily Bollinger Bands. As you can see here, we had a major squeeze in these Bollinger Bands right at the point where we were getting ready to break into a new all-time high. And once again, the Bollinger Bands were telling us that we were due for a very volatile move. So the fact that the Bitcoin price got above the all-time high, of course, that volatile move was to the upside. So those are the previous times over the years throughout Bitcoin's price history where Bitcoin has come back up to a major all-time high breakout, and almost always on the first attempt, we do not succeed. In fact, those last two times, we actually slightly broke into a new all-time high, but that wasn't really the proper breakout into the new all-time high, even though technically speaking, we did put in a new all-time high for a brief period of time. Instead, in those previous times, what we know is Bitcoin actually had a rejection from that first all-time high breakout, with the RSI going from overbought territories on the daily time frame and having a bit of a cool-off, and having a bearish cross in the daily MACD and having a bit of a cool-off. And both times we saw a squeeze in the daily Bollinger Bands, showing us that a very volatile move was coming soon. So if Bitcoin can remain around these sort of price levels for perhaps the next 1 to 2 weeks, then it's very likely that these price oscillators will start bottoming out at some point. And the moment that we start seeing things like a bullish cross in the daily MACD, and when the RSI starts putting in higher lows and higher highs again, that is how you know that the momentum is switching to the upside again. And at that stage, it would be more likely that we would finally have the strength to push into a new all-time high that we did not have the first time around, because we were already too overheated on that first attempt. So even if Bitcoin sees a further pullback to the downside in the short term, talking about the next 1 to 2 weeks, if you're looking at the really small time frames like the 1 hour chart, sure, it might look scary, but when you're zooming out on the daily charts and looking at the big picture and looking at what Bitcoin has done in previous price actions throughout the years, you'll know that this right here is perfectly normal. And if history was any indication, we are due for a major all-time high breakout, most likely before the end of this year. Obviously, it can come sooner than the very end of the year, but basically it's just important to know that we've seen this sort of price action time and time again throughout Bitcoin's history. And so it's really important to not lose sight of the big picture. And with that being said, diving into the shorter term timeframes, this chart shows us the Bitcoin long positions on the Bitfinex exchange, and this is on the 4 hour time frame. And as you can see here, over the last 2 to 3 days, the long positions have been closing. And I'll let you know around 2 to 3 days ago on the channel right back here that we just had a huge spike in the long positions. And I said back then that technically speaking, that is providing buying pressure for the Bitcoin price. But if the Bitcoin price doesn't really do too much in the short term, and more importantly, if we see a bit of a pullback in the Bitcoin price, then that is going to force some of these long positions to close their positions. And when you close a long position, you're essentially selling Bitcoin, providing a selling pressure on the Bitcoin price. So that results in the Bitcoin price going a little bit lower, which results in more long positions closing. And it's basically basically a spiral to the downside until we finally get to the point where enough long positions are flushed out of the market and we finally meet a huge buy war where there's a lot of demand for Bitcoin. So just in the immediate short term, while these long positions are closing, there's going to be that added selling pressure to the Bitcoin price. And by the way, over the past 3 days, just over 1,000 Bitcoin have moved out of these long positions, which is equivalent to around 60 million US dollars worth of long positions that have now been closed. And this is resulting in the Bitcoin price failing to hold some of these important levels. As you can see, we had this upwards trending line of support where we saw multiple bounces, and right now Bitcoin is failing to hold this level. And by the way, this level was coming in at just above 61,000 US dollars per Bitcoin. And right now, at least at the time of filming this video, we are trading below that support, which is obviously a bearish sign just in the immediate short term. I want to make that clear because this is only on the 4-hour time frame. And remember what I was saying about the daily time frame, it's still possible for us to see a short-term pullback, but on the big picture, we're still looking bullish over the next few months. So a potential break to the downside here actually gives us a huge opportunity to get in at potentially some cheaper prices before things really start heating up again. And by the way, for the beginners out there, this pattern is technically a bear flag. And so that does give us a price target to the downside. And that price target is coming in at around 55,500 US dollars. But keep in mind, between now and then, we still have a lot of other areas of support that we can't forget about. So even though this pattern is giving us a price target towards 55,000 approximately, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're definitely going to that price target because of course nothing is guaranteed in these markets. And some other important areas of support include 60,000 US dollars and around 58,000 US dollars, simply because of the huge amounts of confluence that we've seen at those areas in the past. And the amount of confluence that we see on the chart equals the amount of confidence that we can have in the market. And that is something that I teach over in my technical analysis course, which by the way, you'll find a link to this technical analysis course in the description down below. It'll be the first link in the description. For any of you that are serious about learning technical analysis, and especially for any of you that are serious about making a lot of money in the crypto markets. And with that being said, taking a look at another pattern here, as you can see, we were previously forming this bull flag on the chart. And it's very important to look at both the bearish side and the bullish side, and then simply weighing up whether we've got more bearish signs or bullish signs on the chart to determine whether we're looking more bearish or bullish. And right now, this is technically a bullish pattern, but if you're looking at the retest here to confirm this breakout to the upside, the retest is actually looking pretty weak, as you can see. Really, if we were to have a successful retest, the Bitcoin price would need to see a strong bounce from this level just here and continue that bounce to the upside. But obviously, that is not what we're seeing right now. The Bitcoin price is dragging along this line while the Bitcoin price is breaking below other short-term lines of support. So once again, if you're simply looking at both sides, the bullish side and the bearish side, in the shorter term, looking at the 4-hour chart, we do have a little bit more bearish signs than bullish signs. And also zooming in a little bit further into the 2-hour chart, we do have this head and shoulders pattern that has already formed, and we're simply just waiting on a confirmed break below the neckline, which is right now coming in between 60,000 and 61,000. So if we see a confirmed break below this neckline just here, then this pattern gives us a price target to the downside because of course it is a bearish pattern, but that's only if we break the neckline. And this price target is coming in at around 57,500 US dollars. And remember, we've got pretty big support at around 58,000. So keep that in mind as well, but we simply just have a little bit more bearish signs in the shorter term, but on the longer term, in the big picture, I'm still very bullish over the next few months, and I do expect the bull market to continue, possibly into 2022, especially with the US stock market hitting new all-time highs, and especially with big players still getting involved into Bitcoin. For example, that Bitcoin news that I covered a few days ago, where the Commonwealth Bank of Australia, the biggest bank in Australia, officially announced that they are adding crypto services to their bank. And as I said over on my Twitter, those are not the ingredients for a bear market. If the big players are only just starting to get involved, and if the US stock market is still hitting new all-time highs almost every single day, then it becomes increasingly less likely for us to see a major bear market. We usually only see bear markets after the big players got involved, and then we see a huge gain. And also if we see signs of weakness in the stock market, that can usually flow over to crypto, but we're simply not seeing that just now. So really, regardless of what's happening in the short term, any sort of bearish price action I would consider as a buying opportunity for the longer term, because looking at all of these other points, in my opinion, the bull market is not over. And by the way, you'll find a link to my official Twitter in the description down below. Make sure you're following me over on there for extra updates throughout the day. And if you enjoyed this video or got something valuable out of it, be sure to leave a like down below. And if you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe with notifications turned on for more updates just like this every single day. I really do appreciate all of your support in the channel at the moment. I can't thank you guys enough. And for the new viewers on the channel, before you click off, make sure you're checking out one of these uploads if you haven't already. I've got a Bybit tutorial video showing you how I trade on Bybit, which is the exchange that I'm most commonly used to trade Bitcoin. And I've got a passive income video showing you how I earn passive income every day in the crypto markets. But anyway, that is really everything I have to say for this video. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you all in the next video.